Standing Stone Games just released a massive LOTRO news bomb, so let's dive into it. Thanks to the live stream from the executive producer Severlin and the community manager Cordovan, we now know that River Hobbits are indeed coming to LOTRO and actually targeted at the next major update. Along with that, they're looking into River Hobbit housing. We also have more information on the upcoming class, which is confirmed to be called the Mariner. And there's a whole lot of other stuff, such as very excitingly, lag, crafting, a new launcher, even a new LOTRO store coming, and all sorts of different things that we'll get to. But first off, I do want to start with the information on River Hobbits, which is a new playable race coming to the game with the target of update 37, which is LOTRO's next major revamp. You see, Piper even jumped up here with the excitement of that news, and I'm actually sharing some of their concept art that they had drawn up for the River Hobbits, as well as River Hobbit housing and River Hobbit cosmetics. This is just concept art, but we should be seeing some more information soon on what this will actually look like in game if it's targeted for update 37. They didn't have a release date or even estimate for update 37, but I personally would expect August. That said, update 36 did release actually a couple weeks before I expected, so it might even be earlier. Now, after update 37, with the expansion, there will be the new class that basically everybody has been calling Corsair, even though we know it's not called Corsair because of lore reasons, and they finally confirmed that the name is indeed Mariner. They didn't have too many specific details on the Mariner class, but I do plan to have another video dedicated to just exploring possible ideas, but we do know that they are going to do DPS, and then they're also looking into a sea shanty-like music system, kind of like the minstrel, but sea shanty specific for this class. Again, it is limited information, but I think it's great to actually have the class name confirmed so we can start to explore that idea further. By the way, I'll be interested in your all's thoughts on Mariner from a lore perspective. I'm going to post in my Discord channel a topic on that if you're interested in contributing. But moving on to perhaps some of the biggest news in this and that has been discussed recently for LOTRO is lag. They discovered a couple big sources of lag in the game, and actually very rapidly, quick turnover here, they are implementing fixes. So next week, we should expect an update that includes an improvement to two sources of lag. The first has to do with just character effects and the way they work with the game and as you play. The other is with the delving system. They noted that there were some inefficiencies and they can improve that. So in particular, if you are running a lot of delvings or on a server with a lot of people running delvings, you may have noticed a lot of lag spikes, and that you should notice some sizable improvements to lag in these cases. Standing Stone Games also did confirm that they have been focusing a lot of their engineering resources, which albeit are limited, on lag. And I think this is going to be really big for players because it's one of the biggest complaints I see for LOTRO outside of just being an older MMO for people that maybe want a more modern experience. Speaking of modern experience, Severlin basically did confirm that LOTRO Remastered is, as I have sort of posited, and that it's really a series of updates that spread throughout time, not like one major LOTRO Remastered update that's going to be released to the game for anybody curious. So we should see a lot of small improvements, not just to lag, but to these other things to modernize the LOTRO experience throughout this year, next year, and just moving forward. I'll have more details on some specifics with the timeline for that later, but another thing that is actually moving to update 37 again that I think is really big news for players is a stat squish. As exciting as it is to be like 2 health away from 2 million unbuffed on my Warden, a stat squish is very necessary for this game. Our numbers are just way bloated, and they are looking to make them a lot more reasonable while keeping balance relatively the same, which is what you should expect in just a plain stat squish. It could even be as simple, just for example, as dividing every number by 10, and everything would be relatively the same, just reduced by an order of magnitude. Now, this is going to be targeted with update 37 again, before the expansion at the end of the year at the very least. They did comment there is no current plan for a level squish, but they have had active discussions on that. Let me know if you would like to see a level squish. Now, continuing on with update 37, we did get some information on the Guardian and Beorning class. While we have already seen some teases of the Lore Master Hunter and Guardian revamps coming, they did mention for update 37, the Guardian and Beorning are targeted as actually the next class to get updates. They didn't use the word revamp, but did use the word refresh this time. And perhaps this is a perfect time for me to revisit the Redline Beorning problem. Now, I believe also for update 37 is when they were targeting to expand the delving system even further. We've recently seen it expanded to 6-man instances with Great Barrow and Numenos. They're looking to expand that to the Elder Slade missions, which is the War of Three Peaks missions, as well as the Osgiliath instance cluster. Now, that latter one I have concerns because if I remember correctly, it already has at least 2 tiers of difficulty. So I'm curious to see how they handle delvings with an instance that already has multiple tiers of difficulty. Perhaps I'm pessimistic, but I just don't see that working well unless it's basically something where you just run tier 1 of the regular instance so you can emphasize the delving effects. But moving on from that, we can talk about crafting. So they are planning on the first phase of the crafting revamp to be update 37, which is going to notably be before the expansion. And they are talking about the possibility of being able to craft and meaningfully upgrade actually some really good gear pieces that can be competitive with the highest quality level or the best in slot type pieces. They don't have much other information on the crafting revamp and even did mention that some of the specific parts of it are more complex to update than they actually expected, so some of it could be later this year or even next year, including the possibility of having multiple professions that you can pick and choose without being tied to your specific vocation, such as explorer. So after update 37 is when we have the Umbar expansion. That will be update 38, released sometime at the end of this year. We don't know an exact date or target even, but what we do know is it being called the Umbar expansion and all is you will head towards Umbar. But they did give some details that the expansion itself will likely include a lot of Western King's Gondor, which is the western part of the eastern zone that we just got in update 36. Now, I personally actually have some concerns with this, but I'm going to save that for another video and mainly just give you all the news here. And they did also tease the possibility of having like raids and group content on ships, but they say that's more likely than an actual naval combat system, which would be a lot of work and very different for what we have in LOTRO, so shouldn't really expect anything like that. Now, because the Umbar expansion is so far out, they didn't really have any more details that they were ready to share, which makes sense, but we did get some nice teasers there, I think. Now, another thing that we might see sometime later this year, but they were very vague about because they don't know if they will actually get it done, is new legendary servers. Personally, if I had an opinion on this, I would actually rather that they just wait till next year at this point so we can focus on preparing for the new expansion. But I know that might not be the case for everybody, and we'll just see how it goes. They have it as a big unknown if it will be this year or next year. And we're going to wrap this up with basically as equally big news as everything that we have already had with a new launcher that they're working on. Now, this is something that's not very close to actually being released, but they do actually have working prototypes, it sounds like. There are a lot of complexities there, so we don't know exactly when this will come or don't even have really an idea of a potential date for it, but they did give a sort of timeline of different systems things and tech things that they are working on like that. And once they have the new launcher done, they're actually going to be working on multi-factor authentication. A lot of players will rejoice hearing that because security has become a concern with LOTRO, especially around a few months ago. Heard a lot of stories of people losing access to their account and also people just stealing accounts, which is never good to hear. But they also did mention they're working on a new LOTRO store, which actually sounds like it will be earlier than both of those previous things. They're getting pretty close on that, and we should actually have some information on the coming weeks. Basically, this new store will be more modern, essentially, and less outdated than the current LOTRO store. They didn't really mention if anything on like the sales end of thing will change with the new LOTRO store, though. So after those three things is when they will start moving into what they're kind of calling the second half of LOTRO Remastered, with 4K updates and a little bit more specifically with the user interface. And then after these 4K updates, they're also going to work on removing DirectX 9 dependencies. That is if you're running on higher levels of DirectX. So if you can still use DirectX 9. They plan to still support that though. And as y'all can probably tell, I'm quite excited for a lot of this, and I think one of the things that actually helps with this is that both Severlin and Cordovan actually sounded a lot more excited for what they were talking about, all this news, than a lot of previous news updates that they have given. So for me, it was a little bit infectious. Just seeing them so excited to talk about this stuff actively made me more excited about it. Anyway, as usual, let me know your thoughts, and if you enjoyed, don't forget to like and subscribe, and thanks for watching, everyone.